Hi everyone, I'm Karen from Close to My Heart. Today we are going to be creating together a beautiful layout featuring an amazing color combination that I did not come up with myself. You're going to learn how to get some great ones in this video. Before we get started though, I just want to remind you to like and subscribe and turn on your bell notifications right here on YouTube so you don't miss any of our Close to My Heart videos. Here in front of me, I've got an array of photos I've chosen for this layout. These are my grandkids at a fun place we like to go in the fall called Embellish. So I knew already the photos I wanted to use and I printed them 3x4 because the more photos I wanted to fit on a layout, a smaller size is better, but a 3x4 size I feel like still can fit a lot on a page and be seen. Now this is our Love of Color book and I used it to help me choose my color combination. Each page is one of our colors and shows several different color combinations. I chose a paprika color combination because I wanted fall colors, and you can see I chose this one right here on the right side. It's got paprika, peach, sapphire, espresso, and linen. So I knew right away that that was going to be great with my photos. So I grabbed all of the papers that I had in my stash in those colors. You can see here I've got pattern papers and cardstocks in the back, and it's always handy when creating to have your papers already there in the color combination that you'll be using. It will just help you have everything right at your fingertips. I also chose just one accessory really to use on this layout, some wooden hearts. It's nice to have a few of those things chosen ahead of time so that you already know what you're working with as you begin creating. So we'll have these right here to use. And I'm going to move these out of the way next and start thinking about what kind of a page I want. Now, I knew that I wanted to do a title with a technique that I had learned recently with an ombre painting watercolor technique. So I actually did it ahead of time, but I'm going to show you this technique so that I would have my letters already ready to go and dry. So all I'm doing is using our watercolor paint and our distress watercolor cardstock, and we're going to paint an ombre pattern in kind of the colors of this color combination, just the orange and brown family. So I'm using a color that feels kind of like peach, moving into paprika, and then moving into espresso, and then that will give me really cool ombre paper to be able to cut my letters out of. I think it's really helpful to think of a few things before you get creating. So as you and I create together on this layout today, I've already got really what I need in front of me. I will have already known what my title was going to be. I'm calling it Embellish because that is the name of the place we're going, and I'm going to cut that out of this ombre cardstock that I'm working on here. And then I also, like I said before, knew the papers I wanted to use and also the accessory I wanted to use. So that gave me a really good starting point. And I find sometimes I'm even more creative when I have less to use than when I have more. So just having that one accessory is going to help me, I feel like, be really smart about how I create today. And I mentioned those 3x4 photos. I feel like that's a great size. If I could only choose one size of photos to use for the rest of my life scrapbooking, I feel like I would choose 3x4 because I think it's big enough to see what I want to see, but small enough to allow me to put several photos on a layout. And so I may cut some of them down, I don't know, but I felt like it was a great starting point. You can see here that I finished the ombre painting on my paper, and I'm setting that aside and then cleaning on my workspace, and we'll get ready to start our layout. These are the die cut letters that I used, and I'm going to show you my finished letters. Like I said, I did those ahead of time, and I just cut them out of different places on that ombre cardstock so that they'd have a lot of variance in the way they look. And so it says Embellish, which, like I said, is going to be my title. And that's a long title, so I know it's going to need to go horizontally on my layout. I also took the leftover pieces from my cardstock and did a little bit of stamping. I pulled in 3 stamp sets that I thought might be helpful on this layout. One that is our November stamp, one that's about family because it's a family activity, and one that has numbers and dates and things on it that I thought maybe I'd use on my layout as well. So like I said, just pull in a minimal number of supplies and then you'll see what you have to work with and be creative in the way you work. So I think I'm going to get started here next by grabbing some cardstock. I always love a nice white, clean base of what I'm creating. So I'm going to start with that. And knowing that I'm going to do a horizontal title of corn bellies, I think it's a smart idea. I'm thinking here, maybe if I did different widths of stripes along my layout, then that would allow me to have a stripe for my title and a stripe to have some photos going across. And then maybe the other page, it would be smart to do a grid. That's a great way to get a lot of photos onto a page. So I'm going to start by cutting the zip strip off of this piece of pattern paper. This is just a tone-on-tone paper of sapphire, and the other side is a peach pattern, which I think will work nicely into my page. So I'm going to cut a wide strip that I think maybe my photos will fit across. I kind of just guesstimated. I think I cut that like about 4 or 4¼ inches, knowing that my photos were 3 by 4. Then I also want to kind of measure my letters that I cut for my title so that I can think about how wide the strip needs to be for those to fit on. And I thought a 2-inch strip would be just about right after measuring those letters. So I'm just going to kind of make sure that's a good fit. And I like the way that's working. So there's the beginning of my left page. And now I think I'm just going to grab papers that I think would look good with that in stripes that are in my color combination and start cutting them in varying widths, so that I give that page some visual interest. If I did all 2-inch stripes or all 4-inch stripes, it wouldn't be nearly as appealing as varying the different kinds of stripes. I even decided to cut some white cardstock, knowing that I had stamped all of those little pieces on the ombre cardstock, thinking maybe I would add some to a stripe. Also, this sapphire piece is of pattern paper, is really subtle and light. And I'm thinking maybe these light muted colors would be awesome on this page so that the brighter autumn colors in my photos would really stand out. So I'm cutting a little bit more of this color, and that peach is kind of a soft muted color. I have the darker sapphire that I want to put my title on since my letters are more muted. And so I'm thinking this soft look, except for that darker stripe, might be really nice with the brighter photos. So I'm bringing them in to kind of see how I feel like that's going to look. I'm thinking 4 photos across this larger stripe that are all vertical photos would be nice. So I'm just playing a little bit with some of the vertical photos that I've printed. And I finally have gotten a combination here that I think is going to look really nice. So that's helping me too. Having those lay there a little bit is helping me arrange the stripes and decide what colors I still need. There are a couple of colors in my color combination I haven't used yet. Haven't used paprika or espresso, so I'm trying to decide where I might bring those in. I'm grabbing one of the zip strips I cut off. I really love that leaf zip strip that is laying on my page now, and you can tell I'm not gluing anything down. I'm still playing and arranging. Here's where I grab some paprika and think maybe I could bring it in a small amount so that those photos are still the bold color, but that I kind of accent the orange in my daughter Corey's hoodie that she's wearing with that paprika in my color scheme. And I feel like that's a nice addition. And so I'm also grabbing a little bit of espresso, thinking maybe I can do something small with that, and maybe even do a little matting of my photos in some of these bolder colors, because the bold colors in my photos would probably just be enhanced even more by having a brighter, bolder base behind them for a matte. So you can see here I'm cutting some True Color Sapphire cardstock, some espresso cardstock. I've got that stripe of paprika that right now I'm laying right next to where the photos are going, so that when you look at my page, your eyes are going to be kind of naturally drawn to those brighter colors where the photos are and where my title sits. And I'm kind of liking that whole strategy as I'm working here, thinking that that's what we want to have happen, right? When we scrapbook, we really want our eyes to be drawn to the story, and everything else just enhance the story. So I feel like that's happening here. I cut very small mats. I think I cut them 1/8 of an inch larger than my photos, just to frame them, but also let them still fit along that strip without being too crowded. And so I'm liking where things are going. I feel like I'm ready to commit a little bit and start putting some stripes down. I look at that top stripe and think, it's a little bit wider than I want it to be. So I decide I'm going to put that zip strip on there and cover up part of the stripe, and then that piece of paprika right below that zip strip. And then that stripe of the light sapphire color is just about a nice, what's the word I want? I guess variance in size and shape than the rest. Then I'm adding that light peach stripe there where my photos are going to go. And I have that gray stripe with the pluses on it. So I'm adding in a mixture of patterns and cardstocks and tone-on tones, but they're all subtle enough that it doesn't fight. And I like that the largest pattern is right under my photos, which will be covered up quite a bit, but also will help draw your eye there. It's also the color in the whole page that I feel like you see first, that light peach, and then that paprika. And I feel like the navy almost acts like a neutral. So it's doing exactly what I want it to do. So I'm just continuing to add stripes, playing a little bit with where they're positioned, the different sizes. And you can see that other than a few 1/2-inch stripes there on the page up at the top, I think almost every stripe is a different size. So I like the way that's looking. And at this point, I'm thinking I need that paprika to move down a little bit. I want it also down below where the photos are just a tiny bit. So I cut a tiny little 1/8-inch strip and use my all-purpose mat to add my adhesive because I knew I was going to overlap onto my work surface a little and it will just wipe right off of there. And I love how that's looking. I now have framed the area with paprika where my photos and my title are going. And I like that little 1/8-inch strip so much, I decided why not cut one out of espresso too and see if that looks good added somewhere. So I'm just playing a little bit and deciding where I think it might look good. Don't ever be afraid to cut those tiny little cuts because I think that sometimes they feel like a whole mat when really all you've used is just a sliver of cardstock. And I really love that espresso right up there at the top of that photo strip. So now I decided I'm going to start gluing things down. I'm just sort of using my photos to gauge, to measure a little bit where I want them to go and deciding which ones are going to overlap in which way. I think here's where I decide that third photo of Baylor, she's got more space along the sides of her, so I'm going to let her be a little bit underneath the photos on either side of her, and that will frame her a little bit better as well. So you can see what I've got going on here. I let my photos be playful because those stripes are so perfectly straight and geometric. And now I'm deciding it's time to add my title. And something to think about when you're adding a title like this, I'm going to let my title, I think, feel a little playful like my photos since everything else is straight, but positioning that title is maybe a little bit more tricky to have them overlap and go back and forth and be a little tilted here and there. So I'm adding adhesive to each of the letters, but I'm really just pushing down on one little spot on each letter so that if I need to move them and deal a little better with the space, if they don't come out quite right, then I can easily slide them around a little bit without tearing paper that it's glued to. So I'm continuing to add these, and I'm loving the look in that ombre paper that I created with the paints because it's got the soft look like so many of the papers, but it's large enough that you really notice it. And that sapphire behind it, I'm just loving that dark sapphire behind those soft letters. And here I think is about where I'm going to realize that I didn't allow myself quite enough space. So I was really glad at this point I didn't push down too hard on those letters because I did have to go back and do a little bit of adjusting so that it all feels like it fits just right. And I think this try right here, yep, I'm going to get it just about right. I'm going to add that S and be happy with it. And then I'll be ready to press down on all of those letters. And you can see that I've got something fun going on here with the title and the photos being playful and the rest of the page being straight and angular. And now I think it's time to kind of embellish this page. So I'm just grabbing those wood pieces I had decided on at the beginning and thinking about where they might want to go, and then pulling in some of the stamped things that I had done, which I also cut ahead of time, knowing that I would probably use those and that it would be way less fun for you to watch me cut them out. So I'm just spreading those out and my wood shape accessories so I can kind of start thinking about where I might want to use these on the pages. I'm pulling some of those stamped pieces that I've fussy cut out of the ombre paper and just kind of putting them along that white strip that I cut, thinking I might use accessories along that strip. And as I'm playing, I'm thinking, oh, I kind of want those a little closer together. And I want to make sure that if I create a pattern here that I'm having things face different directions and be tilted different directions, upside down, sideways, pointing up, pointing down. And I'm liking that pattern there with an acorn in between each leaf and then alternating leaves. And I also felt like it was a nice variance of where I cut them out of the paper at this point. So I was ready to add them to my page. Some of them are on more of the espresso part I painted, some more on the peachy part. And I'm just adding those on. You could get a little more exact than I am and use a ruler if you wanted to find the center there and work out from the center, but I'm just sort of eyeballing it. I laid them out beforehand and thought, I feel like that's about right. And so that's kind of how I scrapbook. I just kind of do the eyeball method, and I know a lot of other people are very careful measurers. So you could be either in this page for sure, but hopefully these stripes are giving you a great starting place for a layout of your own. And I'm just playing now with some of those wood accessories. I decide I love that cute little speech bubble with the heart in it because Baylor's laughing in that photo, and I love that. So I feel like that kind of shows her laughter, that speech bubble. And then I'm pulling out some of the tiny little wood hearts and adding them to my pattern of stamped pieces that are going along that white daisy cardstock strip. And now I'm just adding in all of the wood. So you can see that I've added that speech bubble, and now I'm just overlapping some of those tiny wood hearts onto the strip of stamped pieces. And I like that combination a lot. Almost like it's the tree. The wood is almost the tree, and then there's the things that came from the tree. And I feel like this layout, without me putting the word autumn on it, already screams autumn with the photos, the colors I've chosen from the Close to My Heart color book, and that I've brought in all of those textures of watercoloring and wood and different patterns on my paper that really are subtle enough that they complement those photos. So here I decided I'm going to use a white daisy base on the other page because I did that on the left page. I love the cleanness of the white at the top and bottom of the page. And I mentioned that I wanted to do a grid on this side, knowing that I have a lot of photos, and that's a great way to get a lot of photos on a page. I also loved this lighter version of sapphire pattern paper because I felt like the photos really kind of sing on there, as you can see on the left page. So I decided that's going to kind of be what's underneath my grid here. So I just cut that down. I think I cut it to like 11.5 by 11.5 so that I had a 1/4 inch border all the way around on all 4 sides. I felt good enough about that to commit and go ahead and lay that down, and that will let me go ahead as I start playing with photos and embellishments and things, know where I want to put things and not have to move that paper that they're sitting on top of. So here I just grab the rest of my photos and start just laying them around on my page and start thinking about where I want things to land on my grid. And here I thought, ooh, wouldn't it be fun if I did a whole row of horizontal photos, which I'm liking right there. And then maybe take other photos and fill in the spaces in other ways. So that photo up there at the top left of Daisy with Stayed on her back, I loved how they were looking into the page. So I chose that as the top corner photo. Here I'm thinking that maybe it would be fun to add a square right to the center of the page that feels sort of like where your eye starts, and then there's like a Ferris wheel almost that goes around it, that you follow the story of the photos. So I add that square right in the middle of several of actually I think all of the grandkids that were there are in that photo. And now I'm thinking there's a few photos I have that I could cut down even more, and it would actually complement what's happening in the photo. There's a lot of background that's not needed there. So I think, what if I took 4 photos that could easily be taken down to 2 by 2 and create almost a little square with those. So here I am just cutting those down to 2 by 2s. and using my trimmer and that clear placket that's on it to kind of see where I want the center to be. This one right here is Cove, and he's walking behind his sister in the corn maze. And this kind of cuts everyone out of the photo but Cove, which, I mean, come on, look at that face. He deserves a photo all of his own, right? And he was not sure about the corn maze. So here I am just kind of playing with those photos I've cut down. I've got one more that I think would look cute cut down. This is Sage and Baylor together. And so I think that it will cut down to a 2x2 nicely and really focus on those two little munches. So I'm just playing a little bit with the photos here, and I kind of decide that those two closer up photos are nice at a diagonal from each other. I also like that photo of Cove looking in toward the other page a little bit, so I add it to the bottom right corner. And now my grid is sort of coming together a little bit. I'm liking how things are going, and so I'm just looking at those blank spaces. I've got all my photos I want on there now and thinking about how I might fill them. And I'm thinking that bottom space that's kind of the long skinny space would be perfect for journaling. So I'm thinking I'm going to put my journaling there. I'm going to start adding some mats to my photos. So that center one is where I want you to start. So I'm going to double mat that one. I'm using some sapphire and white daisy behind it and that full strength of sapphire, so it really pops there in the center. And now I'm thinking, what do I want to put behind these other photos? And I'm looking at the colors I've matted on the other side with, and also the colors that I think would be nice behind some of those photos. And so I'm just playing with those. I'm tying the two sides of the layout together a little bit here by using mats that are skinny, like I did over on the left side. So with the 3x4 photo, I think I cut it 3 1/8 by 4 1/8. And I'm just playing a little bit here to see what photos I like best with the paprika behind them. And I definitely don't want it behind the one with the American flag because it has some red in there, and I felt like that would not work well together, and maybe a white mat on that one would be a better choice. And I really like that. It really makes that flag pop. Isn't that cute? Painted on big rolls of hay. Now I'm looking up at the photo with the, I don't know what you would call that. It's like a sandbox of corn and thinking the espresso would look nice behind that one. And now I want to pull all of those colors kind of down into that little 2x2 grid I made, and thinking that maybe 2 colors behind, 2 of one color and 2 of another. So I'm grabbing the espresso because I feel like that's a really nice neutral behind some of those pieces. And then I'm trying to remember, I think I might have grabbed at this point some sapphire. Let's see what happens next. Nope, there's some paprika actually. So we're going to cut some paprika here into a 2x2 and see how I like that behind a photo. Don't like it there. That really clashed with the red in that photo too. So I liked it a lot underneath that bottom left corner because there's some of that color in the photo. Here I am with some sapphire. And that's going to just kind of tie it all together. We'll put that behind that photo that had kind of that orange-red ride of that pumpkin ride that they were riding. So I know that the bottom one I'm going to add my journaling to. I feel like that's going to be a great spot. So I'm just looking here and kind of measuring a little bit, eyeballing about the size the pieces need to be to fill in those spaces. And I'm looking at the other page and thinking some peach would be nice over on this page. I haven't used any peach yet over here to tie those together. So this time I grabbed some peach cardstock and think maybe I would like some peach cardstock that I could play on a little bit, you know, maybe add some stamping or embellishments on that piece. So I put that in there to see what I think, and I'm kind of liking how that looks. Now I'm looking at that next space, thinking maybe that would be a good place for some espresso. I'm kind of holding that espresso in a few different places, thinking where do I like where it's landing the best, and I kind of settle on that left open block and measure and cut a piece there and think I'll add something to that to give it some personality so it doesn't just feel like solid blocks over there filling in space. I want to bring over the zip strip too, so I'm trying to decide where it might fit. And I think it might look good in that skinny spot down that row of horizontal photos. So I cut myself a piece of that and realized something else probably needs to go with it, or else my space is not filled quite right. And I think, oh, maybe that gray would look really good there too. So I grabbed the gray that's part of my color scheme and cut a piece of that. And I think I cut these pieces 4 1/8 so that they would be the same width as the photo mats that are on that side. And so I lay that over there and put the zip strip on top and think, oh, I kind of like that. Feel like that right side is coming together. Now I need to figure out the size for my journaling. So I'm bringing in my ruler again, and I'm going to use some white daisy cardstock to journal on, and that will bring in a lot of the white that is showing over on that other side. Even with writing on it, I think it's going to bring in kind of that bigger piece of white like is happening on the little stripe where we added our stamped details to. And I like that. I feel like all of a sudden I'm starting to feel a little more balance with that piece of white over there. So now I have to decide what I want to do with what I've got. And I decide I'm going to sort of start with that journaling piece because I know for sure that's a journaling piece, and I might want to add just a little accent piece along the top. So here I am trying a few different things, a few different papers, and I decide to just cut a little piece off that leftover cardstock that I watercolored and cut my title out of. So I've got a nice soft brown that's bringing in that same soft look from the left side on the title. And I grabbed another one of those stamped pieces, and I like how that's looking. So now I'm trying to decide what I want to do with this peach piece, because I definitely don't want it to just be one solid peach block. So I think, what if I stamped some of those stamped images that I did on the watercolor right onto this piece with the same color ink? So I grab my sapphire ink and just sort of start randomly stamping a few leaves. There were oak leaves and maple leaves in this stamp set. I'm varying the directions they're going off the edges so that your eye will continue through that whole piece of peach there without feeling like things are just floating in the middle. So I stamped some oak leaves and left a little space there for some maple leaves to fit in between. Just sort of playing a little bit, making sure it feels balanced and even in the spacing. And I feel good about where it ended up right there. So I decided to try that on the page, and I like that, but it still feels like it needs a little personality. So I'm kind of thinking, what can I do up there that would be nice while I move on to that espresso square? And I think maybe I could stamp on it, and I turn it over to the light side of the cardstock, and I like that better, and decide to use the Gather Together stamp. There were so many good stamps like fall and family all on that stamp set, but I kind of held each of them over the top and decided I liked how Gather Together fit and what it was saying, because that's what we were doing, gathering as a family. So I stamped that onto my espresso piece right there, and I like that. But just like the peach piece, I'm feeling both of those pieces still need a little help. They're not quite there yet. So I'm just kind of looking around to see what I've got that I can add to that. Maybe it's some wood pieces, maybe it's more stamping. I'm still kind of just looking around and choosing things. And while I'm doing that, I'm just going to start gluing the things I'm really sure about and try and get a little creative with what I decide to do to those two pieces. But I really love the shape of what's happening over here. I love the variance in size and shape. A lot of times when people do grids, they make everything the same, like 9 3x3 photos, which is also really cute. But I didn't want it to be too perfect over here on this side, since my left side had that playful feeling of the letters and the photos. I felt like varying the sizes of things over here not only mimicked that not perfect look, but also allowed me to put a lot more photos on my page. So when you have a lot of photos, grids are a great option. And I always think that that striped look that I did over there on the left page is a great fallback when you're trying to come up with a pattern on a page. Varying sizes of stripes and patterns and colors is always really pleasing to look at. But you'll notice over on the left side, I have all those horizontal stripes, and that's why I went with the vertical photos. And here I am just adding all of the photos to their mats and kind of placing and gluing everything down. I've left about 1/4 of an inch border around the outside of everything over there on the right side on the blue. So you can see how that's making it feel balanced. Everything, even though they're different sizes, is centered into a square with about a 1/4 inch border, which is what is sort of tying the pages together, that you can see that softer sapphire over there that's underneath everything and is soft enough that all the bright colors are popping, which I really love, because even though I love to create something artistic, to me, the most important thing that I'm doing when I'm scrapbooking is telling a story. And so I want you to see the story and see the photos and what's happening before you start going, ooh, that's cool and artistic. But I'm okay if you do that too, because that's really fun for me. Okay, here I am going back to some ideas of how I can maybe add just a little more personality to these 2 squares that I've used as filler squares. So I'm adding one of those stamped leaves that I had done on the cardstock that I watercolored. I'm adding in a little bit of wood accessory like we had before. I think I added a heart over there on the leaves and plus paper. And here I am grabbing a few more of those stamped watercolored pieces, and I love that. I feel like it just softened up that whole gathered together square thing that was happening there. So I'm adding those and just overlapping them a little bit in each corner to just highlight the gathered together subtitle. And let's see, I think now I'm going to add some journaling lines. Yep, that's what I'm doing. I love journaling lines to journal on. So I'm adding little lines, and I'm just sort of eyeballing it, probably about a 1/4 inch apart. But you could use a much more perfect method of using your ruler to measure and keeping those the exact amount apart that you wanted. But I'm happy with how mine is turning out. And I get almost to the bottom here and think, ooh, maybe I should add something else to the bottom. So I start grabbing some more stamps and start thinking about what might look nice down there. I find one that says, I think it says fall colors on it. And I really like that. And decide it would be cute at the bottom instead of journaling all the way to the bottom. So I've stamped that fall colors there at the bottom, and I love that. I feel like it sort of grounds that bottom row. And I'm just cleaning my stamp and putting that away and deciding if I think I'm done yet. And I get this idea at this point of, why not stamp on a photo? Just keep in mind that when you stamp on your photos, you need to have printed them on matte photo paper, truly matte photo paper, which I did. So I get a stamp and decide to add it to this photo. And I love this one because I think that it came from the family stamp set that said, some call it chaos, which that's kind of chaos right there. Baylor and Stayed in the middle of all the corn. And now I'm just thinking, why don't I add a few more little wood pieces just to tie it all together? So I'm just playing about where I could add a few things. And I think I settle on adding that little heart by Fall Colors, and just start grabbing a few more small pieces, another little heart in that cluster there of the acorn and the leaf. And at this point, I'm feeling like I am done. All I need to do is my journaling, and I'm just kind of giving it a little appraisal as I look through it, and I'm feeling really happy about how it turned out. Just knowing a few things ahead of time really, really helped, and using that color book was the best.